Germany just pulled the plug on Microsoft, and the man in charge of making it happen literally announced it on a video call using a German-built open-source platform. That's how done they are with Microsoft. It's a government-level breakup with one of the most dominant software companies on Earth, and the reasons behind it go a lot deeper than most headlines are letting on. The state doing this is called Schleswig-Holstein. It's Germany's northernmost state, bordering Denmark to the north and the North Sea to the west. Around 2 million people live there. And by September 2025, virtually no civil servant working in that state's government will be running any Microsoft software on their machine. The man at the center of this decision is Dirk Schroeder, Schleswig-Holstein's digitalization minister. Yet in June 2025, he told the AFP news agency, "We're done with Teams." He said it on a video call conducted through an open-source German communication platform. The scope of this transition is massive. Of the state's roughly 60,000 public servants, around half are in the first phase of the migration. The remaining 30,000 are set to follow in the coming years. And it's not a partial move. They're not just swapping out one app, they're replacing the entire Microsoft stack. By the time this is fully done, Schleswig-Holstein will be running one of the most comprehensive open-source government IT environments of any state government in the Western world. Now let's get to the part that the headlines often gloss over, the privacy problem at the heart of this. Because here's what most people don't realize. Microsoft is an American company. And under a piece of U.S. federal law called the Cloud Act, the Clarifying Lawful Overseas Use of Data Act, passed in 2018, U.S. law enforcement can compel American companies to hand over data stored anywhere in the world. It doesn't matter if that data is sitting on servers in Frankfurt, Dublin, or Amsterdam. If it's in the hands of a U.S. company, American authorities can demand it. And this creates a direct, head-on collision with European law, specifically GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation. GDPR is Europe's gold standard of data protection. Under Article 48, EU citizen data cannot be transferred to a foreign government authority unless that transfer is governed by a recognized international agreement. The Cloud Act bypasses that entirely. It gives U.S. authorities unilateral access without requiring cooperation from EU governments, without the need for a judicial review in Europe. And in many cases, these requests come with a gag order, meaning the company legally cannot even tell you that your data was accessed. So, if you're a European government agency running Microsoft software, here's your impossible situation. Comply with the Cloud Act and you may violate GDPR. Comply with GDPR and you risk falling foul of U.S. federal law. There is no clean middle ground. Legal experts have called it an irreconcilable conflict. Now, Germany has been aware of this problem for a long time. German data protection regulators, through a body called the DSK, spent about 2 years investigating Microsoft 365. Their conclusion, published in 2022, was that Microsoft 365 may not be compatible with GDPR. They flagged that Microsoft doesn't fully disclose which data processing operations it carries out on its own behalf versus on behalf of the customer. In plain terms, you don't fully know what Microsoft is doing with your data. The German state of Hesse had already banned Microsoft 365 in schools back in 2019. Their local data protection commissioner ruled that the platform could potentially expose EU citizens' data to US officials. And even after Microsoft made some adjustments post-2019, adopting certain EU contractual clauses, German regulators said it barely scratched the surface. Then came the moment that many across Europe called a turning point. On June 10, 2025, Microsoft's own chief legal counsel in France appeared before a French Senate committee. He was asked directly, under oath, "Can you guarantee that the data of French citizens stored in Microsoft's cloud in Europe will never be passed to U.S. authorities without the approval of French authorities?" His answer was, "No, I cannot guarantee that," under oath. So I confronted the French Senate. Microsoft's own lawyer admitted they cannot guarantee your data won't end up in the hands of the U.S. government. That statement rippled across Europe, and for Schleswig-Holstein, it was confirmation of what German data protection officials had been warning about for years. The concern is not theoretical. It is real, it is documented, and now it is on the record. So why is this happening now? Germany has had concerns about Microsoft's data practices for years. What changed? A few things converged at once. First, geopolitics. When Donald Trump returned to the White House in January 2025, the tension between the US and Europe, over trade, over NATO, over tech policy, sharpened significantly. Schroeder himself acknowledged in interviews that the geopolitical tensions following Trump's return had strengthened interest in the path Schleswig-Holstein was already on. There was a growing realization across European governments that depending entirely on American tech infrastructure for sensitive government data was not just a privacy risk, it was a strategic vulnerability. There's a concrete example of just how real that vulnerability can be. The International Criminal Court in The Hague, the ICC, announced in November 2025 that it was replacing Microsoft Office with a European alternative. Why? Because earlier in the year, the Trump administration had sanctioned ICC employees, and at one point, the ICC's chief prosecutor, Karim Khan, was temporarily locked out of his own Outlook email account. The ICC, they're one of the world's most important international legal institutions, lost access to critical communication infrastructure because of a political decision made in Washington. That's the kind of dependency Europe is now looking at very, very carefully. Second, regulatory momentum. The EU's Interoperable Europe Act, which came into force in 2024, actively encourages EU governments to prioritize open source technologies and interoperability. It's not a mandate, but it's a strong signal from Brussels, and it's giving political cover to states like Schleswig-Holstein to make the move. Third, cost. Schroeder pointed to Microsoft's enterprise licensing fees running into the millions of euros as a significant factor. Benjamin Jean, a consultant at Paris-based Inno3, put it plainly, public entities are often held by the throat by unexpected software licensing costs. Open source removes that dependency, and while the transition itself isn't free, training, migration, support all cost money, Schleswig-Holstein projects it will save tens of millions of euros over the long term. But let's talk about the actual tech being deployed here, because this is where things get interesting. The migration didn't start in 2025. Schleswig-Holstein began this process back in 2021, when the Register first reported on plans to move from Microsoft Office to LibreOffice. By 2024, they'd already transitioned around 24,000 employees across to LibreOffice, Nextcloud, OpenExchange, and Thunderbird. Then came a significant milestone. Schleswig-Holstein completed a 6-month migration that moved more than 40,000 accounts and over 100 million emails and calendar entries away from Microsoft Exchange Server and Outlook onto OpenExchange and Mozilla Thunderbird. That's a staggering amount of data to move without losing a thing, and they pulled it off. The plan going forward is for the state to migrate all remaining data to a German-owned public cloud infrastructure. Not an American cloud, not even a European subsidiary of an American company. German-owned, German-operated. Subject entirely to German and EU law. That matters because, as we've established, putting your data in a German-based Microsoft data center doesn't protect it from the Cloud Act. What matters is who owns and controls the infrastructure, not just where the servers physically are. If the company is American, US law can reach the data regardless of the building it sits in. The open source stack they're moving to, LibreOffice, Thunderbird, Nextcloud, Linux, is auditable. The code is open for inspection. There are no hidden data pipelines, no undisclosed telemetry feeding back to a US parent company. You don't have to trust that the software is protecting your interests. You can verify it yourself. Is this going to work? This is a fair question, and it deserves a real answer, because this road has been traveled before and didn't end well. The most famous example is Munich. Back in the early 2000s, the city of Munich made headlines for switching its government computers to Linux. For years, it was held up as the poster child of open source adoption in government. Then in 2013, they began a review. And in 2017, Munich announced it was going back to Windows, citing lack of political support and integration issues. It was a very public, very expensive reversal. Schleswig-Holstein's officials are aware of this history. Professor Francois Pellegrini, an IT professor at Bordeaux University, has noted that staff resistance is one of the biggest practical challenges at migrations like this. When you've spent 20 years using Word, learning LibreOffice feels like a step backward, even if it isn't. But there are reasons to think Schleswig-Holstein's attempt may have better odds than Munich's. For one, the technology has genuinely improved. LibreOffice in 2025 is a far more capable product than it was in 2010. Nextcloud and OpenExchange have matured significantly. The tools are more polished, more compatible, and better supported than they were in the Munich era. For another, the political and legal environment has shifted dramatically. Munich's reversal happened in a world where GDPR didn't yet exist, and the Cloud Act hadn't been passed. Today, every EU public body is legally required under GDPR to conduct data protection impact assessments before deploying new technology. And when those assessments are done for US cloud services, the Cloud Act consistently flags as a high risk. The legal pressure to move is now baked into EU regulation in a way it simply wasn't before. Schleswig-Holstein's move is bold, it's disruptive, and yes, it's risky. Migrations of this scale are hard. Staff training is expensive. Compatibility issues will arise. Bureaucratic friction is real. The critics who call it political theater are not entirely wrong to ask hard questions about whether the total cost of ownership has been properly calculated. But the reason this is happening isn't political theater. It's the documented, legally verified, under oath confirmed fact that European governments using American cloud infrastructure cannot fully guarantee the privacy of their citizens' data under their own laws. That's not a talking point. That's the conclusion of 2 years of German data protection investigation, multiple European court rulings, a French Senate hearing, and the words of Microsoft's own lawyer. When a government minister says we're done with Teams and proves it by doing the interview on a German-built platform, it sends a message not just to Microsoft, but to every government watching from the outside. Whether Schleswig-Holstein succeeds or stumbles, this moment matters. Because it marks the point where digital sovereignty stopped being a slogan at European tech conferences and started showing up on the desks of 60,000 civil servants, police officers, and judges with an uninstall notice attached. If you found this useful, drop a comment below. And subscribe if you want to stay ahead of stories like this one.